Welcome back. Welcome in. This is Country Roads Confidential at earsports.com. We are part of the Paramount Podcast Network. One more day here with our Big 12 opponent previews for West Virginia. It takes us to Austin, Texas, and the Texas Longhorns, specifically Horns 24/7, and the amazing, brilliant, plugged in columnist down there. Chip Brown has the scoop on, it seems like everybody in Austin. I've heard a great anecdote about you, Chip. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You do not go into an establishment in Austin until you leave with a phone number or a connection.
Yeah. I always say some people collect wine, some people collect comic books. I collect phone numbers.
When I was teaching adjunct level journalism classes, and one of our colleagues, Joel Cox, came in and talked to them, and he said that, like, if you want to get connected, you have to work on it. And he told me in my class that like, if you're going to go somewhere and you're going to be somewhere, do something to be somebody. And he mentioned that you always go in there, get a business card or a phone number, make a connection. And Starbucks, a restaurant, a bar, a haircut, whatever, it seems like you know somebody because you have taken the time, and it pays off because no one does it better when it comes to Austin's main preoccupation, Texas Longhorns. And that's why we're here today. We're going to talk about the team that's always back, that has won the offseason once again, but has this one, maybe two awkward seasons left in the Big 12, but it could be really exciting this year. I think the theme of the season, it's the end sooner or later for them. So let's start at the end. How does this end for Texas? It seems like all the momentum off the field, positive direction. Things are shaping out to be something big, but that's not entirely new, and they haven't had the best success on the field. So it's somewhat similar to past scripts, but is this any different? Is this a team or a season that actually cashes in on all the good things it's done up to this point?
Yeah. Well, Michael, the 2021 season was so weird because they got off to that 4-1 start. They led Oklahoma 28-7 in the first quarter, and that first half was sort of every Texas Longhorn fan's Red River shootout dream. And then they don't close the deal. Caleb Williams comes in, turns the dream into a nightmare. And then it repeats itself, against Oklahoma State the next week, and then against Baylor, where they've got double-digit third quarter leads. And so the narrative sort of changed from, we hope to see Oklahoma again in the Big 12 title game, to, we need our guys in here. And so flash forward to the, 40% roster turnover, and Steve Sarkisian's already, got it down. 57 of his 85 scholarship players are freshmen or sophomores. So I've been saying that 8 wins in Arch Manning would be a successful step in 2022 for the Longhorns. Well, they got the commitment from Arch Manning probably earlier than most people thought, on June 26th. And now they just got to come up with 8 wins. And it's a tricky schedule because obviously there are a lot of unknowns in the Big 12 this year, but one thing that is known is Alabama, with Bryce Young and Will Anderson coming into Austin on September 10th. And that Steve Sarkisian has said will show how far they've come or expose how far they have to go. So that's one of those games that's going to test where this program is, where the culture is, from a handling adversity standpoint, because they could not handle adversity at all last year. You lose at home to Kansas, on top of that 6-game losing streak, the longest in program history since 1956. So I'm not one of these that's ready to jump out and say, Quinn Ewers and all these incredible transfers have come in, and they may well be incredible transfers who can help transform things. But until they show they know how to win and handle adversity, I'm not ready to give them that. So to me, 8 wins is, that's good. I think you play on the road at Texas Tech, at Oklahoma State, at K-State. people are thinking Texas Tech is not much, but they were trending under Matt Wells toward having a big year in 2022. We'll see. And Oklahoma State judge or undervalue Mike Gundy's ability to reload at your own peril. And K-State, this might be the best team that Chris Kleiman's had. So not to mention West Virginia coming in with Graham Harrell running the offense and JT Daniels at quarterback. So, Texas has got to show they can finish games and they know how to impose their will on teams. I thought the team played more physically under Tom Herman than they did last year under Steve Sarkisian. And that may be because of the new coaching staff. It was a bit of a, Sarkisian put his defensive staff together, pretty much all of the position coaches before he named Pete Kwiatkowski the defensive coordinator. So now they got Gary Patterson as a special assistant to Steve Sarkisian, and Patterson's got ideas and he's been doing the opponent scout. He knows the Big 12. And so it's going to be a fascinating year in Austin, but they need to show progress, obviously, from that 5-7. And I've got it at 8-4 in the regular season.
Yeah, it's a fascinating program, period, because everything that's happened, but also all the storylines up to the season. You've leveled or laid out so many of them on just the ground level here. But the more you get into this, the more you discover. And one of my favorite things to read, Chip, is your morning brew there, because it has so many, I don't know, pieces of inside information, behind the scenes stuff. So this is teed up for you here. We're going to go kind of beneath the surface here. I think anybody who follows Texas is wise to check out your site, our network. If they want to know about Texas, they're going to go over to your place and see what you guys are saying over there. So we all know the top of the mind stuff. What is something beneath the surface that you've heard, people have whispered about, they've told you in confidence that you can share? You think it's going to be really important. Someone, something, an angle, an approach, a tactic that maybe right now it's not a big deal, but once the season gets going, it's going to become apparent that it really matters. What has your attention?
Well, I think we thought that defensively they would be better than they were last year, and they were terrible. I mean, they gave up 200 yards rushing per game, 5.2 yards per carry, 31 points per game. Pete Kwiatkowski had said that his goal as a defensive coordinator every year, no matter what, is to hold opponents to 20 points or less. And that was a big miss. And there is a lot of talent up front defensively, but it just hasn't shown. And so I think that's where you have to keep your eye focused, because Sarkisian's bought himself time with the quarterbacks that he's brought in, with Quinn Ewers and now the commitment from Arch Manning. But defensively, having Gary Patterson as a special assistant, does he help Pete Kwiatkowski understand the Big 12 more? Does he help with the communication or whatever is needed on that in that defensive coaching room? Because Bo Davis, the defensive line coach, got a raise from $900,000 to $1 million in the offseason. So they have 4 assistant coaches now making $1 million. That's a first in Texas football history. Maybe it's a first in any program. But that's where my focus is. The defense has got to be tied together better. And, they don't have a lot of sure things at cornerback. They've moved 3 players from other positions to safety. Anthony Cook from nickel to safety, Keaton Crawford from corner to safety, and Mo Blackwell from linebacker to safety. And all 3 of those guys, along with Jaron Thompson, are expected to be on the field. And so you've just got these unknowns that I think are kind of flying under the radar, underneath all the glitz and glam of the offense and the transfer of Quinn Ewers to Texas, of Ajayi Hall, the the highly talented but somewhat temperamental wide receiver from Alabama, Isaiah Neyor from Wyoming, 12 touchdown catches last year, led the Mountain West. He's 6'3", big catch radius, and makes contested catches. And Texas didn't seem to have a receiver outside of Jordan Whittington and Xavier Worthy who could make a contested catch last year. It's amazing. If you look at all the scholarships Texas has given to receivers over the last 5, 6, 7 years and how few have panned out. And then here comes Xavier Worthy as a true freshman and breaks all the records, 12 touchdown catches. Just an unbelievable year as a true freshman. And so I think the defensive side gets lost. And, Gary Patterson sitting there is tempting for Steve Sarkisian. If things get off to a tough start, here you've got this guy who's got all kinds of defensive pedigree in the Big 12. Does he stick with the course or does he change course? And so I think that's one of those stories that's just kind of below the radar. And of course, no one's going to talk about that now because Pete Kwiatkowski, he's been there a year as the defensive coordinator, and he's a very successful defensive coordinator. He was fantastic at Washington with Chris Peterson. So, it's a bit of a reset for him. And so I think that's something that everyone, should keep an eye on. If there's, great defensive improvement, I think Gary Patterson's probably going to get some of the credit for that.
Let's stick with the coaching and the staff, and in particular Sarkisian. He's like a very human figure just because of his story, and it seems from afar he's been pretty transparent about just everything from football to life and things like that. And then that maybe has helped him so much with his response this offseason too, which is kind of what I focused on. I don't know how real the danger was for him last year, but people weren't happy. I don't know how unhappy they were. You can fill us in on that. But I think a lot of times you hire a coach not to get into trouble, but in the event they get in trouble, can they get out of it? On the field, off the field, recruiting, wins and losses, whatever. It sure seems like he's done it. The transfer portal's been very good. As you said, he's bought himself time with the quarterbacks he's landed too. Patterson on the coaching staff, but man, also Brendan Marion came in from Pitt. That should help the offense and the passing game there too, which is a great thing if you have the quarterbacks and the receivers. I just wonder about the damage control that he has performed this offseason and how much that has surprised and maybe satisfied people down there.
Yeah, I think he's done a good job on that. He came right out and said during this tour that the coaches did, the head coaches, football, Chris Beard, basketball, Vic Schaefer, the women's basketball coach. They did a little, booster tour back in early summer, and Steve Sarkisian said he did not do a good enough job of getting his team to connect with each other and with the coaches while they were displaced from their football complex, which was still undergoing some renovation that was not completed until August, mid-August. So they were all over the place in meeting rooms. They were meeting in suites in the north end of the football stadium. And he felt like he didn't do a good enough job of team building. And so he's placed a big emphasis on that now. I think anytime you can look in the mirror and say, and he said, I failed, and say that you failed, that's a positive, certainly coming off the Tom Herman era, which, he said, he would never say he was out-coached ever, like even in games where he was clearly out-coached. So there was very little that was Tom Herman's fault. I think it was part of the personality, sort of rift that grew between Tom Herman and the administration. And so Steve Sarkisian comes in, like you said, he's a guy who's looked in the mirror because of his past flaws. And you're hearing that in the recruiting, when players like Arch Manning, they talk about how authentic Steve Sarkisian is. I think he has learned some life lessons. Now he's got to show he can win, Mike, because his best season as a head coach is a 9-win season at USC, and then he got fired at USC. So when you compare that to Gary Patterson, who's won 6 conference championships, he's won a Rose Bowl. Steve Sarkisian has unbelievable offensive prowess, and that's why he got hired at Texas. They thought he was a guy who could match wits with Lincoln Riley and develop quarterbacks like Lincoln Riley. And now Lincoln Riley's at USC, but Steve Sarkisian's got to take those steps and show that he is a guy who's ready to win as a head coach, whose life lessons can be applicable to his players in getting them to handle adversity and all that. So he's a fascinating guy. I think he's he has a tight inner circle. He's not, he's good with the media, but he's not, he does the bare minimum. And I think, based on what he's been through in the past, and a lot of times at Texas, head coaches come here worried about all the various elements that can impact the football program, from big money donors to people in the administration to the media, who can dilute his message to his players. And so I think he's more Nick Saban than he is Pete Carroll. Let's put it that way, in terms of how he doesn't let his coordinators talk to the media. He doesn't let his assistant coaches talk to the media. And we've had one opportunity to talk to those assistants, and it was after they got hired. We haven't really talked to them since. And that kind of tells you where things are. He wants the message to come from him, not from anyone else, along the lines of Nick Saban and Bill Parcells. So he's an interesting character for sure.
Lots of control seeking to exert on the staff. That's a difficult thing to do, especially when the program is as vast as Texas. When it is as big as Texas, there's going to be a lot of star power. No shortage of talent on this roster. You could look at offense, you could look at defense, you can look at special teams and find players here. Where do you begin? Who are the brightest stars on this roster that are going to make a splash in 22?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that the running back room may be the best in the country. Bijan Robinson, yes, everyone knows about Bijan Robinson, but Roschon Johnson. Roschon Johnson is one of the better stories on the team. And I talked to NFL scouts and they love this guy. He's a guy who will do it all. He'll do it. He came in as a quarterback. He changed to running back when they had some injuries 3 years ago. And then he, was talking to Tom Herman and said, look, if you think I can have an impact at running back, I'll stay at running back. Otherwise, I'll go back to quarterback. And they said, the way that you've trained yourself to play running back, we can use you as a running back. And they did. And last year against K-State, both quarterbacks were injured. Casey Thompson and Hudson Card were both injured. Casey Thompson with a thumb, Hudson Card with an ankle injury he suffered against West Virginia. And Roschon Johnson ended up playing quarterback, Wildcat style, ran it 30 times, and was the difference in Texas winning that game, ending the 6-game losing streak and finishing the season on a winning note. And that guy is the biggest vocal leader on the team. And so, he's a big part of the puzzle. And then you add in Keelan Robinson and Jonathan Brooks and even the true freshman, Jaden Blue, who we haven't seen yet, but I've heard some good things already. That room is loaded. And then at receiver, they're loaded with all the guys I mentioned earlier: Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington, Isaiah Nair, Ajayi Hall. And then Brennan Thompson, who ran a 10-200 in the high school state meet, is a true freshman who's already drawing kind of the same praise from teammates that Xavier Worthy drew during the summer last year. So, question marks. You've got, tight end, offensive line, but offensively, and then quarterback, obviously the billing, the hype, the recruiting ranking around Quinn Ewers has everyone already anointing him. But defensively, DeMarvion Overshawn is a guy who's coming back for his 5th year, COVID year, and he moved from safety. He's a lightning fast linebacker, but he didn't have the strength. He was one of the last guys to report in 2020 from the COVID year because he was home working, helping his family pay the bills. And then in 21, he had a shoulder injury that kept him from really being able to put on the kind of strength, muscle that he needed to. And he's finally had that off season. And so we'll see how that translates to play on the field. But Alfred Collins up front, I mean, this is a guy who's what NFL teams play with. And, T'Vondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, all those guys physically have the tools. It's just, can the coaches put them in the right position to be successful? At that point, Mike, it gets a little, there are a lot of question marks. As I mentioned, cornerback, safety, even linebacker beyond DeMarvion Overshawn. They're counting on a guy named Jalen Ford who should be ready for prime time. But until we see it, we don't know. And so, those are the key names to keep an eye on.
All right. We started at the end with how you thought the season would go. Everything in the Big 12 starts at the quarterback position. So we're going to end at the beginning here. I can't think of a quarterback room, situation, platoon, whatever, now and in the future that's more intriguing than Texas. I don't know what to expect from Ewers except that everybody loves him. And here comes Arch Manning. But they also have other guys there who were pretty touted players in high school that could play for or start for a number of other programs. So I don't know how high the hype is and how long the leash is for Ewers, but if it's on him, there's so much talent on offense. Maybe somebody else gets a chance. Maybe it's ride or die with Ewers, because if it's on him this year, you got Manning coming in next year. I'll stop babbling. What do we make of the quarterback position at Texas?
Yeah, I think Quinn Ewers is going to end up being the guy. The question is, when? Is it going to be in mid-August? Is it going to be after Alabama? Is it going to be 3 games in, 4 games in, whatever, but it's ultimately going to be Quinn Ewers. Hudson Card, unless he can just change his personality, I think showed last year that he may not have the makeup to be the quarterback at Texas, where you've got to be a leader. You got to be a vocal leader. You got to be a guy that everyone will follow. And Hudson Card got in. Look, he was a freshman last year, redshirt freshman, first year of Steve Sarkisian's offense. It's a complicated, or voluminous, I should say, voluminous offense, tons of protections, motions, all that. But when things got tough, he hung his head, he got quiet, and that just isn't going to work. He lacks pocket presence. Now, we've seen guys make big jumps in an offseason, but Quinn Ewers is a guy that players are drawn to. He's got a lot of confidence. He's a bit like Brett Favre. I mean, he turned it over a lot in the spring and no one talked about it, but my sources said it wasn't even close. Like the number of interceptions that Quinn Ewers threw compared to Hudson Card. He's got to get that fixed, obviously, by getting the offense down to the point where, he's not just gunslinging like Brett Favre, a young Brett Favre out there, because that will not work for Steve Sarkisian. It won't work for any team, but particularly Steve Sarkisian. So it's going to be fascinating to see how Quinn Ewers adjusts. Quinn Ewers has not played, he's not started a football game since his junior year in high school. He reclassified and left high school early, went to Ohio State in, late August. I mean, he had no fall camp, no nothing. It was just weird. I don't think Ohio State even expected him to do that. And so last year was kind of a lost year, except for the NIL money that he, apparently received. And then, now he's had a chance to get to know his teammates through spring and summer, and he's part of the team going into this 2022 season. So I think that's how this thing shapes up. There's another really interesting quarterback in the room that no one's talking about, named Maalik Murphy, who led his team to a state championship.
I was going to interrupt you and be like, here we are. We haven't even mentioned Murphy yet.
Yeah. And he is the big personality, Mike. He is the guy. When he walks in the locker room, he lights it up. All the players are drawn to him. He is every bit of 6'5". He had a really serious ankle injury he suffered in that state championship game in December. So he was basically a spectator in the spring, but if he should be good to go in fall camp. We'll see how quickly he can pick up the offense. And in a lot of ways, to me, he's the guy who needs to sort of be the glue in that room. You know, Hudson Card's probably going to get offers. If he doesn't get the job, he'll have opportunities to play elsewhere. I don't know. He's pretty close to graduating in 3 years, so he might get his degree from Texas and go elsewhere if he's not the guy. If he is, it's obviously a totally different story. But I think Maalik Murphy is a really interesting guy. And of course, Steve Sarkisian prides himself on being able to say that in 2002 at USC, he had Carson Palmer winning the Heisman Trophy. He had Matt Castle and he had Matt Leinart. And he, of course, chose Matt Leinart to be the starter in 2003. Matt Castle never started a game at quarterback at USC, but went on to a 15-year NFL career. And, his selling point to having a stacked quarterback room is, I'm going to get you ready for the NFL, even if you're not playing. And so we'll see. In this day and age with the transfer portal, that is a much tougher sell, as we know. So, but I think Texas fans see it where Quinn Ewers, because he was the #1 overall recruit in 2021, they see him as winning the job at some point this year, being the starter in 23 while Arch Manning's redshirting. And if Quinn Ewers is as good as everyone thinks he is, he's a 2-year and out to the NFL draft player, and Arch Manning takes over in 2024. Now, 1,000 different things could happen between now and then that could change that line of thinking. But I think that's where the quarterback situation stands right now.
I think that about covers 40 acres of territory there, Chip. Can't ask for a better source of information there. Can't ask for
well, and I have to say, Dicker the kicker turned Dicker the punter is gone. And that's a big deal because Texas they were spoiled. They've had really good kicking the last decade.
Yeah.
And so they may be relying on a true freshman this year, kicking field goals, and Will Stone. And the punter is another Aussie import, and Isaac Pearson. We'll see how well he does it. So no more Dicker the kicker.
All right, now I think that about covers everything.
That covers it.
A man named for my heart there, talking about special teams at the very end. You got to get the necessary stuff in, Chip. So I'm glad you did.
That's right.
Listen, thanks for the time, man. Thanks for all the information. As always, appreciate it. And we will do this soon.
Okay. Take care.